Hi, this time around I want to talk to you about how to get the best out of your lawn at this time of year. It's a beautiful spring day. We've had a very wet winter, and as a result there's a huge amount of moss in the lawn. And normally there's a reason why there's moss in the lawn. It's normally because it's very compacted or there's very poor drainage, and the moss creates this thatch on top of the lawn. This is something that a lot of people don't realise. It's very good to actually sort of dig a hole in your lawn and find out what the root structure and the soil structure and the roots and the top of the grass and where the moss is, and find out what is causing the problem. So I'm going to dig a little square hole here and lift this piece of turf out of the ground. So we've got a bit of the soil profile. So a little square hole. The whole thing will go back in the ground. So you're probably thinking, what am I doing? So, and then come back to the first one. And then the whole thing will lift out. And especially when it's an old lawn, you see you end up with a build-up of thatch, which is basically dead grass and moss, and it gives the moss something to latch onto. Moss hates disturbance, and so when you see you've got lovely root structure, you've got good quality soil there. It's slightly sandy, but the roots are right down here. You've got some very fine little roots, so that is not bad. I've seen the thatch far worse, but what happens is the thatch builds up over years. It stops the water penetrating the soil surface, so the moss then grows, and the only way to get rid of the moss is to scratch it out, either with a machine, that's a scarifier, or using a springtime rake, which is next door to me. So I'm just going to stamp that back in, but I would recommend doing a few exploratory holes across the lawn, so you can see sometimes it's roots, sometimes it can be rubble under the soil, so the drainage is very poor. So scarifying with a springtime rake on a small area, it's blooming hard work, but you can see you start to bring out all this rubbish, which is basically dead grass and moss. And this is what you want to do in one direction, and then if you're doing it and you do it again in the opposite direction. And even just from that little area, 2 foot, you end up with that ridiculous amount of dead grass. And so on a small area you can do it like this, but I should be using a scarifying machine to show you how to do it on a larger area. Now, if you want to use a scarifier, I've used many different models over the years. This is a relatively new model called the Still 540 scarifier. You can have a collector on the back, but I don't tend to use the collector. It's petrol engine. It's very light and maneuverable. It's, you know, on its own, I can pick that up with one hand. So when it comes to going around trees and shrubs or close to paths, you can actually move it around really nicely. Still 50-to-1 oil mix in the petrol. I'm going to give it a start. So the lever goes forward, lean forward, and with a bit of luck it'll start. Up. No. Hey. Lever down, the blades engage, and as I walk forward you can see it bringing up all the moss underneath. I'm just demonstrating a small area here. You can adjust the height of the setting so it goes down a bit lower if you wish. But you can see the amount of rubbish that it's actually generating from this lawn. And what you need to do afterwards is to go in a different direction, either diagonally or completely across it. Another thing is to actually overlap where you're going, so you're not over the same different place all the time. Bit of overlap. That's literally just scratching the surface. Excuse the pun. As you can see, the amount of detritus, dead grass and moss that comes out from using a scarifier is truly staggering. It bulks up to this enormous amount of fluffy stuff. You need a good dry day to do this, when the grass isn't too wet, or else it clogs up in the machine. So today is a perfect spring day to do this. Now, once you've got rid of all this rubbish, you can then think about treating the lawn with a moss killer if you wish, but regular scarifying, if you don't want to use any chemicals, will actually just also encourage the grass to grow. The other crucial thing is a lot of people don't realise how much air is important to the roots of grass. So once it's been scarified and you've got a lot of this rubbish out, whether you do it now in the spring or in the autumn, it's very good to use an aerating machine, either with tines on that actually go into the machine, or a hollow tiner which takes out cores. We've been serenaded by a green woodpecker in the background there. The bird song at the moment is just fabulous. It's spring and they're all setting up their territories. Anyway, back to the lawns. Hollow tining takes out the cores, and then that air getting into the roots of the grass is really, really important. It helps reinvigorate the lawn. If you want to, if you go down the route of moss killing, you've got to wait 2 weeks after moss killing if you want to get rid of any extra moss, and you can scarify again. But you've got to leave that moss killer down for 2 weeks. As we go into April, into May, you can think about putting a feed weed and moss killer, which will encourage the grass, kill off any residual moss and any weeds that you might have. A lot of people are actually thinking about going down the route of sowing wildflowers and wildflower seed, or letting the grass grow longer. So don't cut the grass as short as you would do. And at this time of the year, keep the grass a little bit longer so that it actually regenerates quickly. But there we are. I'm going to go across this in a different direction, so there's going to be a lot more of this rubbish to come out of the lawn, but it'll make a massive difference. Happy gardening.